Hi there. I'm truly glad you decided to be here watching this. And if you chose to subscribe to my channel, my gratitude would be boundless. Honestly, it would mean more than I could say. Anyway, let's get started. The very first thing I remember is the sound, soft, almost dull, the faint clink of a spoon tapping the inside of a ceramic bowl as Allison stirred milk into her cereal. It was ordinary, painfully, almost cruelly ordinary. "I'm seeing someone else," she said. No hesitation, no search for softer words, no uneasy breath before the plunge. The sentence came out of her mouth as smoothly as placing a folded napkin beside her plate. My hand froze halfway to my lips, coffee radiating warmth into my fingers. Slowly, I looked up, waiting for the smirk, the playful shake of her head, the inevitable admission that it was a badly timed joke. But her eyes, those steady, unblinking eyes I'd once trusted more than my own judgment, gave me nothing but certainty. "With who?" I asked. The voice didn't sound like mine. It was far too calm for the chaos tearing through my chest. She set her spoon down with deliberate care. "Eric, from work. He's our creative director. We've been talking a lot. It wasn't something I intended." Of course it wasn't intentional. It never is. Affairs just spread, messy and irreversible, like coffee bleeding into a white carpet. "And you're telling me this now because—" My breath felt shallow. The words scraped out of me. She leaned back, speaking in a tone better suited for discussing tax returns. "Because I want to be transparent. You always said honesty mattered to you." That's when it clicked. This wasn't a slip, not a moment of unplanned confession. She'd rehearsed it, polished every word. Maybe she'd even tested the delivery on him. And then came the strike that made the rest feel like warm-up blows. "I don't think this has to break us, Jack. I need you to be strong enough to understand." The word, understand, landed twice, blunt and heavy, like two fists to the ribs. My face flushed hot, my heartbeat roaring in my ears. I clung to the coffee mug as though it could keep me from unraveling. "You're asking me to understand you cheating on me?" I managed. It sounded more like a charge than a question. She blinked slowly, her expression unnervingly calm. "That's not what I'm saying. I never wanted to hurt you, but it happened and I think we can—" "No." My voice cracked, louder than I'd meant. "You don't burn the house down and then expect me to admire the flames." Her jaw tightened. "This is exactly what I worried about, your overreaction, you getting emotional." "Emotional?" I let out a sharp, hollow laugh. "You mean human?" And so it spiraled. Me, trying to map out the sudden sinkhole where my life had been, and her, dressing up betrayal in noble language as if I should thank her for the courtesy of confessing. Eventually she gave up, muttering something about needing space before retreating to the bedroom. I stayed at the table, long after she'd gone. The silence was thick, heavy, like the air before a storm. Pale Seattle light seeped in, cold, distant. The faint scent of burnt toast clung to the kitchen. 10 years together, hikes on weekends, overpriced coffee indulgences, late-night debates over TV shows. Sure, we'd argued before, but never had she delivered a blow designed to fracture everything. "My name's Jack Alden, 38, regional marketing lead for an outdoor gear company. Half a mortgage to my name. 2 bikes in the garage, 1 golden retriever who always sleeps by the front door. And until an hour ago, I thought my wife believed in the life we'd made. Now, all I had was a mug of cooling coffee, a knot in my throat, and one phrase echoing like a cruel refrain. Be man enough to understand." Picture sitting across from the person you love, hearing them package infidelity as self-growth, and knowing it's only the start of the fractures. The next morning, I stood barefoot in the garden, staring at the rosemary bush I'd planted 5 years earlier. Its leaves had turned brittle. Maybe I'd overwatered it. Maybe I'd stopped paying attention. Through the kitchen window, I heard that same faint ring of metal against ceramic. This time it was tea. She always made tea after an argument. It was her way of scrubbing off guilt. I stayed outside, surrounded by damp air, far from her curated calm. The city lay under its usual gray shroud, quiet enough that even the gulls didn't bother calling. Her voice drifted out, soft, deliberate. "I don't want a divorce, Jack, unless you do." I didn't turn. I let her words hang like fog. She sipped, unhurried, as if she hadn't gutted our marriage yesterday. My toes traced the cracks in the patio tiles. This little patch of green had once been my refuge. Now it felt like a graveyard for promises. Did she want me to feel grateful? To thank her for choosing to stay married while another man haunted her thoughts? I wondered how many times she'd rehearsed that sentence, maybe between guilty sips of coffee and late-night conversations that weren't with me. I plucked a dried bloom from the rosemary and crushed it between my fingers until it dissolved to dust. Fitting, I thought. That was us now. Something once tended, left to dry and crumble in silence. You don't walk away from a breakfast like yesterday's without scars. You might pretend, wear the smiles at parties, stand together at gatherings, hear the inevitable, "You two are perfect," and you'll nod, knowing the truth is rotting underneath. People like the illusion better. Allison excelled at that, braiding just enough honesty into the lie to make it sound almost noble. Another sip. "I think we can move forward from this," she said, soaked in denial. I finally turned, leaning in the doorway, arms crossed. She stood in her robe, hair damp, face unpainted. Even stripped bare, she seemed untouchable. "What does that even mean?" My voice was low, edged. Her eyes held mine a heartbeat too long. "It means I'm not ready to give up. I made a mistake, yes. But one mistake doesn't erase our history." She sounded like a brochure for a retreat center. I hated how she could turn poison into something that almost passed for hope. "Yesterday you called it love," I said. "Not a mistake." She faltered, the mug in her hand trembling faintly. Feelings shift. I was caught up. "I don't want to lose you, Jack." I could have laughed, or shouted, or both. Instead, I turned away, the cold tiles numbing my feet. "You already have," I said. Without looking back, I stepped through the gate. It closed behind me with a tired metallic sigh. That night, I stalled on my way home. I took the long route, circled the neighborhood twice, letting my headlights sweep over the cracked garage door before finally turning into the driveway. The porch sat in darkness, but upstairs, the window to the room that had always been ours, glowed faintly, light seeping through pale curtains like a lantern buried in mist. I lingered at the door, keys pressed hard into my palm, my pulse hammering in my ears. Years ago, I would have burst inside, called her name, maybe brought in a bag of warm pastries from Pike Place. But now I just stared at the doorknob, as if it might confess something if I waited long enough. Eventually, I eased the door open without a sound. Inside, the air was heavy with the scent of red wine and a cologne I'd never worn. Somewhere in the house, faint music played. Soft, familiar jazz. The same playlist she once said made her restless after a few loops. Now it floated down from the bedroom. I walked past the living room without glancing at the Banff photo framed on the wall. The hallway was dim, but behind the bedroom door I caught it. Glasses clinking, low laughter, a man's voice. Calm, certain. She hadn't hidden him. She'd brought him here, to our bed. I froze, staring at that door as if it were the edge of a cliff. My hands curled into fists before I noticed. I could have walked away, driven off, but something in me gave, not with heat, but with a cold, brittle snap, like wire breaking. I turned the handle. The scene inside could have been pulled from a magazine spread. Candles glowing, wine half drunk. She wore her favorite blue sweater, the one she reached for when she wanted to look effortlessly beautiful. He was mid-30s, clean-cut, expensive watch, smiling at something she'd said. They both froze when they saw me. She shot to her feet. He followed, slower, measured. "Hey, man, I think there's—" "Leave," I said. Quiet, absolute. He looked at her. She stayed silent, holding her wine glass like a shield, eyes wide. Leave, I repeated. He stepped past me, his footsteps dull against the floor. I moved aside, not for politeness, but to get him out before I turned to her. For a while she only stood there, breathing shallow, watching me. I let the silence stretch. You told me it wasn't physical, I said. Her shoulders flinched. You told me you wanted to fix this and you bring him here? Her lips parted, but nothing came out. You could have met him anywhere, his place, a hotel, but you chose our bedroom. I didn't mean... Don't, I said, sharper now. Don't pretend this wasn't deliberate. You poured the wine. You put on the playlist. You dressed for it. Her gaze fell, something like shame flickering, or maybe she was just wearing it. I needed clarity, she murmured. I gave a single humorless laugh. And? Did you find it? She said nothing. I turned toward the door. Her hand lifted, hesitated mid-air, then fell without touching me. I'm staying at Leo's, I said flatly. Jack, she began, but I was already walking away. I closed the door behind me, slow and controlled. Leo lived clear across town. We hadn't talked much in years, but when he opened the door, he didn't ask. He just handed me a beer. You look wrecked, he said. I sank into his battered leather couch, staring at the label on the bottle. I didn't speak. Not yet. Something had shifted, not just in what we were, but in me. Allison could call it a mistake, a search for clarity. I knew better. She'd lit the match while I was still inside. She could watch it burn alone. The next morning, I drifted through the city like I was underwater. The hum of traffic, sirens, scattered voices, they all blurred into one muted noise. My hands stayed buried in my jacket pockets, thoughts looping in slow, heavy circles. I'd told Leo only that she'd brought someone home and hadn't bothered to hide it. He'd offered conversation, even jokes, but I wasn't ready. Somewhere between Pike and Yale, it happened. I almost hit someone. She stepped into the crosswalk just as I turned, a small woman in an oversized scarf carrying a stack of books. I slammed the brakes, seatbelt locking, her hand smacking my hood in reflex. But she didn't yell. She crouched to gather a paper bag that had spilled, then stepped to my window and tapped on the glass. I rolled it down, bracing for anger. You okay? She asked. What? I said, caught off guard. You nearly hit me, she replied, brushing a strand of hair from her face. But you look more like the one who got hit. I had nothing clever, just a stiff nod. She gave a small, warm smile, the kind strangers give when they know how to soften the edges. Maybe pull over, take a breather, she said, already stepping away. Wait, I said, not knowing why. Sorry, I didn't see you. That's clear, she said lightly. It's fine, I'm fine. Something in her calm tone loosened something in me I didn't know was locked. You dropped your book, I said, handing it to her. Thanks. What are you reading? I asked, stalling. She showed the cover. The Year of Magical Thinking. I gave a dry laugh. Appropriate. Yeah, she said with half a smile. Grief, dressed up as literature. We stood there, me in the car, her on the sidewalk, in a still, unhurried quiet. No filler. I'm Jack, I said. Sophie? The name fit her, steady, balanced. I should get out of the road, she said. Yeah, I answered, but didn't move. Take care, Jack. Then she disappeared into the flow of people. I pulled over at the next open spot, hands gripping the wheel. For the first time in days, Allison's betrayal wasn't replaying in my head. I was thinking about Sophie, how she hadn't yelled, hadn't pitied me, just looked at me and seen something I couldn't. I didn't know what it meant yet, but in a city made of noise, that had been the first thing that felt true. Maybe it was a start. The bookstore cafe sat on a quiet corner, windows fogged with steam and breath. The first time I saw her there, Sophie was at a table by the glass, bent over a hardcover, so lost in the words it was as if the rest of the world had vanished. I hadn't planned on going in. I hadn't planned to stop, but there she was, framed behind the cafe window like a scene you can't unsee. My steps faltered before my hand went rogue and pushed the door open. The bell overhead chimed and she looked up instantly. For a second, We simply held each other's gaze, caught in a quiet pause. Then the edges of her lips lifted. "I was hoping you'd actually take my unsolicited advice and ease up," she said. I chuckled under my breath. "Slowing down seems to be my only reliable skill these days." She tilted her head toward the vacant seat across from her. "You a coffee person?" "Only when it doesn't taste like regret," I said. Her laugh, loud, rich, unguarded, pulled a few nearby customers into our orbit, smiling without knowing why. At first, we only crossed paths by coincidence. No arrangements, no messages. Just two people appearing at the same neighborhood cafe until coincidence felt like something else. Sophie had this way of listening that loosened your words. She never cut in, never flipped the focus back to herself too soon. She just waited, patient as rain, until I'd said everything that had been rattling around in my head. I told her about my job, how promoting hiking gear from behind a desk made me feel more trapped indoors than ever. She told me her life was a mix of social work, bookstore shifts, and food bank volunteering when she had the energy for it. "You wear a lot of hats," I said one afternoon. "Not a single one that fits," she replied with a small shrug. "But I keep trying them on anyway." We never spoke of Allison. We didn't need to. What Sophie and I had wasn't romance, not yet. No touching, no flirtation. Just two people exchanging fragments of themselves in the hush of a place made for telling stories. One afternoon, she reached for her mug, and her sleeve slipped enough to show a thin scar along her wrist. She saw my eyes catch on it. "Car crash," she said flatly. "A long time ago." I nodded. Some marks need only acknowledgement, not questions. With her, the silence was as full as the words. Hours passed that way, sometimes broken only by a half-whispered line from a book or a film hardly anyone else had seen. And always, when we stood to leave, the same parting words lingered between us. "Same time next week?" Neither of us ever declined. Back home, the quiet between Allison and me had turned into something immovable. We moved around each other without touching, ate in separate corners, slept in a bed that felt more like furniture than a shared space. I never told anyone about Sophie. Not Leo, not my co-workers. She wasn't a secret. She was oxygen. That night, Allison posted a photo. I was sprawled on the couch, scrolling without focus after leaving the cafe, when it appeared her and Eric, the man she'd once called her emotional mistake, sitting at a rooftop bar. Glasses raised, Seattle's skyline glowing behind them, his arm over her chair, her body leaning in. The caption, one word, free. I stared longer than I thought I would, not in anger or sadness, but with the muted clarity of watching the tide drag away something already half buried. 10 minutes later, I refreshed. The photo was gone. A few stray comments lingered. "Girl, this isn't it," from someone she worked with. "Wow, didn't expect this," from another. She must have seen the backlash and taken it down. I let the phone drop onto the carpet and looked up at the ceiling. The living room felt more like an airport lounge than a home. The walls still held framed moments, weddings, vacations, birthdays, preserved from a life that had long since stopped moving forward. We hadn't added a single one in over a year. I didn't ask where she was, didn't call. Our silence was fluent now. Every door left shut, every plate washed alone, every abandoned sock on the floor, its own unspoken vocabulary. Instead, I zipped a hoodie and walked until I reached the water's edge. The wind coming off the sound bit against my skin, sharp and honest. I pulled out my phone, not to message her, but to open a blank note titled, "Things I Didn't Say." Nothing on it yet, until that night. "I don't hate you, but I might hate the version of myself I've become with you." I hovered, considered erasing it, then locked the screen and kept moving. Sophie didn't know about the post, and I wasn't going to tell her. Our space existed outside the wreckage, without labels. She didn't pry into what I was running from, and I didn't ask what she was healing from. We simply met as we were. Next time we met, she brought a thermos instead of her usual cafe mug. "This one's for sleeping," she said, pouring into a cup she'd carried along. brewed with a hint of optimism. I smirked. Risky. Only enough to take the edge off reality. We sat outside, despite the cold, the sky hanging heavy and low. People passed by in smudged motion. She noticed my quiet. "You all right?" she asked. I nodded. "Just tired of pretending my house still feels like a home." Her gaze softened, but she didn't rush to fill the silence. She let it sit between us. "The thing about walls," she said finally, "is they remember, even when we'd rather forget." I carried that sentence all the way home. The place was dark and still, but I didn't feel entirely alone. I felt protective of the connection Sophie and I had, and of the parts of myself slowly re-emerging. I didn't know if we were friends or edging towards something else. I didn't care to define it. I hadn't told anyone about her, not because I was hiding, but because I didn't want anyone spoiling it. Maybe I never would. One Tuesday night, I cooked for the first time in weeks. Real food, not something pulled from the freezer. Garlic, rosemary, lemon zest filled the air, grounding me. My hands moved like they remembered better times, when cooking meant sharing. Sophie was coming over. It wasn't planned, just a casual moment the day before. "I make a decent risotto," I'd said. "Prove it," she'd challenged with a raised brow. Now I was at the stove, stirring like the outcome mattered. The place looked tidy. Laundry folded, shelves dusted, even a dead bulb replaced. Not for Sophie, I told myself. I just didn't want her to see the aftermath Allison left. When the bell rang, Sophie stepped in, scanning the room. "Smells incredible," she said. "So you really can cook." I hoped my body would remember the rhythm without conscious thought. She slipped her scarf from her shoulders and draped it over the coat rack, her fingertips brushing the edge of a photograph I hadn't yet taken down. Me and Allison at Lake Chelan, both squinting into a sun-soaked horizon. Her gaze flicked away, offering no comment. We ate side by side on the couch, legs folded under us, an old playlist of hushed acoustic melodies spilling softly from the speakers. She spoke about her week, the shelter clients, the novel she'd given up halfway through, the stranger at the farmer's market who handed her an apple for no reason at all. I listened, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. My laughter came without effort. When hers escaped, she hid it behind her hand, as though too much joy might be dangerous. The creak of a door broke the moment, not the front, but the side one that always groaned in complaint. Allison stepped inside without knocking, her heels clicking once on the tile before she stopped. Sophie turned first, then me. Allison's gaze swept the room. 2 plates, soft music, my body leaning towards Sophie as if she were the gravity here. She said nothing, only dipped her head in a small, muted acknowledgement before walking past, the way someone might ignore a misplaced glass left on the counter. She vanished down the hall. The air changed instantly. Sophie didn't ask what that was about. She didn't need to. I searched her expression for traces of anger or shock, some sign she'd get up and leave. Instead, she offered me a deliberate, quiet smile. "You weren't hiding this," she said gently. "You just didn't think you'd get caught this early." Her words landed with precision. I nodded, unsure whether what I felt was relief or exposure. "I didn't want it to get complicated," I admitted. "It's already complicated," she replied, placing her glass down carefully. "Now it's just visible." I walked her to the door later that night. Allison's name never surfaced in conversation, and as Sophie disappeared into the cool night, I was startled to realize I didn't feel guilt. I felt steady. For once, the secret wasn't mine to hold. The next morning, the kitchen felt hollow. No scent of coffee, no clink of dishes. Just the low hum of the refrigerator and the sound of my own steps. Allison sat at the table, robe pulled tight, eyes fixed on some invisible point. She stirred her tea in slow, mechanical circles. "Who is she?" The question was soft, almost level. I poured myself a glass of water. "You don't get to ask that." Her head snapped toward me. "But you get to bring her here? Into our home?" I walk in and she's laughing, Jack. "That's rich," I said, setting the glass down. coming from someone who brought her lover into our bedroom. Her jaw tightened. She began to speak, but faltered. When the words came, they were thin and breaking. That was different. "No," I said, arms folded against the counter. "It wasn't." Silence swelled between us. She gripped her mug as if it could hold her together. "Do you love her?" The question shot out like it had been burning in her all night. "I don't know what it is yet," I said honestly, "but it's not built on lies." Her nostrils flared. "So I'm the villain now." "You cheated and justified it," I said, voice even, "then blamed me for reacting like a person. And now that you're breathing without my permission, I'm supposed to care?" she snapped, standing so fast her chair scraped the floor. "You stopped respecting me," I said, the words cold. I saw them land. She paced, then turned, eyes bright with accusation. "You think it's easy for me? Watching you with someone else like we're already done? Like you never tried?" "I did try," I said, "every day. While you were falling for someone else, in our kitchen, on your lunch breaks, in all those extra moments you convinced yourself didn't count." Her gaze dropped, lips trembling. "You told me to be man enough to understand. Maybe you should be woman enough to admit you didn't expect me to move on first." She didn't reply. I took my jacket from the hook. At the door, I looked back once. "Her name's Sophie." Then I left. The door clicked shut, and this time the silence stayed behind. Allison didn't call. No texts, no knocks on my office door. That night, the house felt like a museum, orderly, still, haunted by the morning. I half expected her to run off to Spokane or disappear into a hotel room, but her car stayed in the driveway, unmoved. After dinner, while I was rinsing the last plate, I heard the sound of her heels. She entered holding an envelope, placing it on the table between us. My name was scrawled across the front, just Jack, no flourish. "I wrote something," she said, voice almost a whisper. I stayed where I was. "I thought you deserved clarity." "Now you want to be clear?" I asked. She flinched but didn't fire back. "I wanted you to know how it started, what I felt, what I didn't." "All right," I said. She lingered, clearly hoping I'd open it. I didn't. "Allison, I don't need a speech or a tidy confession." Her brow furrowed. "Then what do you want?" Her voice caught somewhere between demand and plea. I thought for a moment. "I want to stop pretending this is temporary. I want peace. I want to laugh in my kitchen without it feeling stolen. I want a home, not a stage." Her eyes shone, but she held the tears back. "So you want a divorce?" "I want honesty. If that means divorce, yes." She looked from the envelope to me. "I never thought you'd actually leave." "I know. That's why you thought you could get away with it." Her face broke slightly, but I didn't move toward her. That wasn't my role anymore. I slid the envelope into a drawer. Maybe I'd read it someday, maybe not. My choice was already made, and this time I didn't need her agreement. The next morning, she appeared at my office door, knocking softly. "There's something I need to say. Will you meet me after work?" Her tone was steady. I almost said no, but curiosity pulled me in. The cafe she chose was all reclaimed wood and Edison bulbs, with jazz humming a little too loudly. She sat at a back table, hair tied up, fingers circling the rim of an untouched cup. She spotted me heading her way, the corners of her mouth lifting just enough to suggest a smile, one that stopped short of her eyes. "Glad you came," she murmured. I slid into the chair opposite without returning the courtesy. The air between us thickened, edges sharp enough to cut. Her first words split the tension. "I broke it off with Eric." No preamble, no dramatic pause. I said nothing. "He left town for a new job. I didn't follow." I stirred my coffee, the spoon clinking against ceramic. "Was that before or after you realized I wasn't waiting around for you?" Her lips pressed into a thin line. "After. Of course it was." She exhaled. "I'm not proud of how things went. I kept telling myself it was temporary, a mistake I could undo. But the truth? I wanted something else, something that didn't feel like a sink full of dishes or nodding off halfway through a Friday night." I let the silence hold. I thought I could juggle it, she continued, gaze fixed on the mug in her hands, that I could chase the excitement and still come back to the safety of us. I gave her nothing. And now that both are gone, you're here, I finally said. Her head lifted, wounded by the implication. I'm not asking you to feel sorry for me, she shot back. I'm asking you to be fair. Fair? I almost laughed. She sat straighter. I think we both made mistakes. And maybe if you walk away from her, I won't have to be the one who loses. There it was, not longing, not guilt, just the fear of ending up empty-handed. You didn't lose me, Allison, I told her. You threw me away. You gambled what we had for a thrill, and now you want to break even. She leaned forward. If you leave her, we can start over. Fresh. The weight in my chest turned to disbelief. You really think that's how this works? Her voice dropped. I think we still have something real. We know each other's flaws. We've made it through before. Made it through? I said. That's your selling point? She faltered. I leaned back, shaking my head. And then, for the first time in months, I laughed. Not out of spite, not with bitterness, but like a man finally setting down a burden he'd carried too long. You're right about one thing, I said. We do know each other's flaws. A flicker of hope lit in her eyes. And I finally recognized mine. Her voice was barely a whisper. What's that? I stayed loyal to someone who treated love like a trade. She started to speak, but I was already rising to my feet. My empty cup met the table with a soft click. When you're ready to send the divorce papers, send them. She stayed frozen, as if she could claw the words back out of the air, but it was over. Outside, the city's hum wrapped around me, the cafe door's chime fading behind. For the first time in more than a year, the air felt clean. Not because the story had ended, but because I had stopped trying to breathe life into something long dead. Healing didn't crash over me in one wave. It came in uneven breaths. 2 weeks later, I left the Seattle house. A month passed. A manila envelope arrived. Inside, signed papers. No letter, no explanation. Just silence tucked neatly between the sheets. I signed, dropped them at my lawyer's office, and blocked her number before temptation could rewrite my resolve. That was it. I hadn't left the city, only the chapter. Sophie and I didn't rush to define what we were. No labels, no scripted promises. We just kept showing up week after week, until one afternoon she handed me a small packet of sunflower seeds. I want a garden, she said. I grinned. You sure you trust me with soil and responsibility? Her smile was steady. You don't ruin what you care for. We found a small single story in a quiet coastal town 2 hours away. Nothing grand, just broad windows, a porch swing that sighed in the wind, and a tired garden bed waiting for a second chance. Salt air drifted through the rooms. We knew it was home as soon as we crossed the threshold. That first month we planted tomatoes, basil, mint, and always sunflowers. They didn't take easily. The rain, the poor soil, the stubborn roots all resisted us. But we kept tending them. Slowly life found a way. So did I. I split my days between branding projects and leading weekend hikes for a local outdoor co-op. Sophie worked part-time at the library, spending her afternoons mixing teas or painting strange map-like sketches she called emotional cartography. Evenings were for reading unfinished novels aloud, for dancing in the kitchen when something boiled over, for arguing without retreating into silence. It was a quiet happiness, steady, unforced. Then, one afternoon while watering the garden, my phone buzzed. No subject line, a strange address. I opened it. One word. Regret. No attachments, no explanation. I stared for a moment, not because I meant to reply, but because I understood. The final move in a game she no longer controlled. Allison had never learned to apologize without making it a spectacle. Maybe she never would. I deleted it, set the phone aside, and turned back to the sunflowers. A few had opened, their yellow faces angled toward the late summer sun. Sophie stepped onto the porch, drying her hands on a towel. "Everything okay?" she called. I looked at her, the wind tugging at her hair, the calm in her voice. "Yeah," I said. Everything's perfect. And it was. Not vengeance, not even closure. Just peace, earned, planted, and grown from the remains of something that had never truly been worth keeping. I pressed my hands into the soil and didn't look back.